What's up, interpreters? I'm André Copeland and happy to be here with you today.
What is up, interpreters? I am Paul Caputo, NAI's Executive Director.
What's up, interpreters? I'm Song, your NAI Conferences and Events Manager, and I would just like to say you're welcome right out of the gate because Andre Copeland has the best voice ever. And this is a
Oh,
podcast, so you're welcome,
you're,
interpreters.
you're
It's,
embarrassing me now.
it's true, and I'm a little jealous, honestly. Nobody's going to compare to Andre, which is going to be great, by the way, at the NAI National Conference, where Andre is going to be a keynote speaker. I'm jumping the gun. Song, it's your turn.
I would just like to say a spoiler alert, Paul.
Oh, sorry.
Just
Spoiler.
kidding. It's
If you
been
didn't want to hear that,
announced.
fast forward 30 seconds.
It's been announced, and yes, we are more than thrilled that Andre is our closing keynote speaker at National Conference this year in Virginia Beach. And Andre, you're talking about perspectives.
Yes, perspectives and perception. And actually going to hone in a bit on perception as that hidden architect that we have within all of us. And want people to really start to think about why they perceive the world the way they do, why they have the perspectives that they do. And this, I think, can help us understand why we see things so differently and help bring divisive parties actually to the center where we can find common ground. So hopefully it'll be a really nice closing keynote address, and I'm anxious to see how people receive it.
Well, I'll be sitting there front row. Okay, not really. I have to sit back at the tech table.
Yeah, you're back with all the
There's
wires and the equipment and the plugs and everything. I will get to be in the front row though. It's such a fascinating subject, and as you outline it here, I think it's really relevant to folks in many professions. What's the specific tie for you to this idea of perspectives and interpretation in particular?
I think what really drew this to me is, believe it or not, professional interpretation and being involved in professional interpretation. One of the things that I started to notice as I was moving through my career in frontline interpretation, that frontline interpreters, they are real-time navigators of perspective. They are constantly gauging people's perception, and then they are taking a look at these diverse perspectives they're encountering and trying to bring these together and form ideas or get people to consider ideas around our resources. So as I started to think about perception, I wanted to find out how we might be able to utilize this knowledge in our planning as well as in our courses. And then as we engage in dialogue with people at our interpretive sites and even in our personal lives. As I started to take a look at the work that Dr. David Busey was doing and Curie, our new interpretive planner, I started to think about what interpretive planners do on a professional basis. And as I started to take a look at what professional planners do, that seemed to be more in line with being an architect of perception. It started to really focus on intentional design and empathy driven design. And so that starts to really attack, well, I shouldn't say attack, but it really starts to connect with our perception, how we start to think about what something is before we utilize our perspective to understand why something is to be, or we start to attach meaning to it. So those were the two things that really started to interest me, is that perspective being more so about the what something is, and I mean our perception, excuse me, being more so about the what something is, and our perspective is what helps us assign meaning to things and helps us understand why we view things as important versus unimportant, or we might view something very differently than someone else.
Andre, before you became philosopher, philosopher Andre, you currently work at the Brookfield Zoo in
Hmm.
Illinois. How long have you worked there, and did you start your career there?
Did not start my career at Brookfield Zoo. It's actually Brookfield Zoo Chicago now. We wanted to make sure that we embraced the Chicago Zoological Society, which was the founding body of Brookfield Zoo. So that's why we are currently Brookfield Zoo Chicago. I defected over to Brookfield Zoo Chicago in 1999 after working at Lincoln Park Zoo from 1988 till 1999. So I am lucky enough to have the ability to be associated with two world-class zoos. I'm lucky enough to have started my zoo career at Lincoln Park Zoo, right in the center of the city, really starting to understand animal care, welfare, conservation, and being able to take that foundation that Lincoln Park Zoo gave me, come over to Brookfield Zoo Chicago, and start to explore things in many different ways. So that's some of the ways that I transitioned over into professional interpretation. At Lincoln Park Zoo, my first years were focused on animal care and welfare. I worked with animals ranging from birds of prey to bears, big cats, seals, and sea lions. And my last 2 years at Lincoln Park Zoo, I was coordinating the traveling zoo, kind of taking Lincoln Park Zoo's message on the road and helping connect their message and mission to guests across the Chicagoland area. And when I saw an opening at Brookfield Zoo Chicago, it gave me a chance to exercise those skill sets, learn more skill sets by helping people engage in conservation initiatives, storylines here at the zoo itself. So it was really a good move for me. I get to, cooperate and work with, friends down at Lincoln Park Zoo a lot, even Shed Aquarium. So really happy to be here in this area where we have these three world-class organizations focused on professional interpretation as well as conservation and making things better for the natural world.
Andre, obviously, there's controversy everywhere these
Hmm.
days. Sociopolitically, the divisiveness that exists in our world right now is getting more and more extreme. The question of perspectives, in my mind, is a big part of that, right? Like we almost seem to be coming at the world from different realities based on the set of facts that we receive and buy into. Certainly that's true at zoos, right? Like,
Hmm.
depending on which documentary folks have seen, they have different perspectives on the roles of zoos in the world right now. So the presentation that you'll be doing on perspectives and the whole notion of perspectives, even in the work that you do every day with Brookfield Zoo Chicago, how much has that changed with time as it feels we have become more and more divided?
I think what has changed over time with that is, at least here at Brookfield Zoo Chicago and within our education and community engagement department, we've started to take more of a focus on why people say some of the things they do, why they believe the way they do, as opposed to putting so much focus on what was being said. Because if we can understand why people have a certain perspective or perception, then we're able to find common ground. Because you're right, Paul, there are so many different things that we experience and we are on different sides of the fence about. So, for example, when you're thinking about our perspective, our unique point of view, we may walk into a situation, say, for example, you all are familiar with street performers, aren't you? A lot of people, see people on the street, whether it's music, could be art, going down to New
Buskers.
Orleans. Yes, there we go. So we all can perceive that based upon the knowledge that we've gained. We all can see somebody out there and perceive that, this is a street performer. However, how we perceive that information, our background, everything that we've been exposed to, then determines whether one person's perspective views that as something vibrant, a display of creativity, or another person might say, this is a public nuisance. It's too much noise. And so, if we can dig down to find out why we are both able to see this as a street performance, but then start to understand why we might venture off into different paths, it does help us realize where we have common ground and helps us understand each other a little bit better. Not to say it's always going to change our point of view, but sometimes taking a look at a situation or an event through somebody else's lens may challenge our own perspective and perceptions and cause us to take a look at things a bit more objectively as opposed to subjectively.
Andre, it's actually really funny that you would say that. And I know it's Song's turn to ask a question, but I've got to jump in here because when I was 16 years old, I was on a study abroad summer trip in Nice, France, and I didn't have a lot of spending cash. And
Hmm.
so I know how to juggle, and I had a bucket hat, and I put a little sign out that said American student in French, and I juggled for probably, I don't know, an hour and a half, 2 hours, and earned enough money to go parasailing, which is what I really wanted to do. I wanted to go parasailing. And I have thought so many times since then. I mean, I had no awareness of it at the time, but like I've thought so many times about how I must have been perceived as an American teenager in France juggling for money so that I could go parasailing, right? Like it seems so stupid now to think about
Hmm.
it, but like it's funny that you would bring up the whole idea of, busking and the street performing because I actually did it once myself and have wondered ever since how I was perceived by the people who passed by.
That is interesting, but one thing we can, I'd say focus on is the fact that everybody who did contribute to your parasailing adventure may have perceived you in a slightly different way, but they all found somewhere, even though they didn't talk, some type of common ground that made them feel that, you know what, I want to support this person. I want to help this person out.
Well, some
Um,
of them did.
and some of
It,
them, I know some probably just walked on by.
It's true. And I will say too that it was long enough ago that I was a teenager in France that they were putting French francs in my hat, not euros. So that's how long it's been since I was a teenager.
All right. Well, you are still younger than me, so.
Andre, the topic of perspectives and just your experience and longevity of in the interpretation field,
Hmm.
does this concept, like, is it only for leadership, or is this concept for everybody? If I'm a new interpreter, is this something that I can quickly pick up, or is it definitely a maturity?
It's something that I think anybody can pick up if they really think about it. And to be quite honest, I know that I talk about perspective and perception uh, connected to our profession and professional interpretation. However, without knowing the specific terms, without knowing the theories behind it and the things that I've studied recently, I was actually engaging in a lot of this practice when I was extremely young because the way I was brought up, and I'm not going to get into too many spoiler alerts, but I was brought up in a situation where there were a lot of, you will never be able to do this. You can't do this. You won't ever do this. And that was the perspective that was given to me by some medical professionals, as well as family, these types of things. However, based upon some other experiences that I had, some ideas that I had, I decided to buck that system and I decided to see things differently. And give one spoiler alert, one of the things I was told that I would never ever be able to do was go outside and run. That was something that was going to be an alien and foreign concept to me throughout my life. And I'm going to date myself. Even here at 62, I'm still running back and forth across the zoo. So it took me to alter my perception just a bit, look at things through a different perspective, and decide I'm not going to be resigned to how other people saw me or saw my future. So I think this is something that people can utilize, can understand, and start to think about, even in their personal life. I don't think it really takes an extreme amount of knowledge. I decided to deeply research a lot of this because I just love to know how things work. I'm just a geek like that. And also, when I was asked to share these thoughts, I wanted to make sure that anything I was sharing wasn't coming just from me. Yeah, my own opinion, my own perspective. I wanted to find out what the research was out there, what psychologists and sociologists were saying about perspective and perception, and how it helps us make sense of our world. I also wanted to find out if this was something that was even worth sharing with anybody. Would people get anything out of this? And so the more I studied, the more I thought about my own journey, I thought that there could be some benefit in sharing some of these ideas, sharing these philosophies, helping people understand a bit about the intricate way that perception and perspective work together, how they both can affect one another and change. Perspective can actually change your perception, just as perception can change your perspective. And so, just thinking about those types of things and some of the situations that you can be in, and how relatively easy it is to actually look at something through someone else's eyes. I think people will be really surprised. And I think one of the things that we'll touch upon in our pre-workshop is how you can actually look at something through a different perspective without needing to change your own beliefs. So you can absolutely hold on to your own beliefs, even if you take a look at something through someone else's perspective to try to understand how they're viewing things. And again, I'm going to reiterate that don't have to be a psychologist, don't have to have a bunch of background in this, don't have to do a bunch of research. I'll leave people with a few things to think about after the keynote that they can walk away with and hopefully start them on the journey to think about perspective and perspective sharing.
You really anticipated my next question here, which was going to be, I asked you earlier, how do you take this sort of larger idea of perspectives and focus it on interpretation? The reverse of that in my mind is how, as a professional interpreter, did you determine which were the fields that you want to look at to aid in your research? You mentioned psychology, philosophy has come up a couple of times here. How did you how did you arrive at what were the fields and then how did you begin that sort of research? Because I would imagine any field that you are not involved in is just going to feel massive as you're trying to delve into it.
Absolutely. It was massive. So, what I wanted to do is I wanted to first identify what perspective and perception are. What are people saying about that? So, that's when I went to psychology, sociology, and the scientific community to get different definitions on those. And then after that, I wanted to see how psychologists were saying about how these things work together and intertwine. And as I started to do that, I wanted to then say, okay, well, then, how is perception and perspective sharing and taking utilized in the medical field? Because what I want to do is get a wide perspective, something that's outside of our own echo chamber, and see if these theories, if these ideas that I was coming up with when reading this would transfer outside of our own profession. Because I feel that if it can transfer outside of our own profession, it can be applicable to the medical field, to school, to just everyday life, then of course it's going to be something that would be of great use to our interpreters. So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just looking at information that was solely focused on the interpretive profession, but trying to find a lot of professions that were focusing on this so that I could see what the synergies were. So basically, I just cast a wide net, just started reading, jumping down rabbit holes. I am so happy that there is AI like Google Gemini and stuff now, help me read through a lot of research, validate different research, and connect different perspectives and help find common ground. So I was able to cover a lot more research with the modern advancements in a short amount of time, as opposed to, for example, when I was coming up with mission-based dialogue. It took me about 3 years, I think, to go through a lot of that research. Whereas with this, it took probably about a year and a half to start sifting through, hundreds of research articles, this type of thing. So I think that, again, I just cast that wide net, try to read as much as I can, find that common ground within the research, what people are saying, and so that way I can determine what will be most applicable to my audiences.
I don't even know what to talk to you about, Andre, because well, you've got your awesome pre-conference session at conference, the workshop. Then you have your keynote. Last year, you provided an amazing concurrent session.
Mhm.
You are a serial conference presenter, and your sessions are like standing room only. So yeah, I don't know. I kind of want to ask you, being in Chicago, are you a Cubs fan or a White Sox fan?
White Sox. Definitely White Sox.
South side.
South
You
side.
you and the Pope both.
There you go. There you go. I mean, I am one of those people, though, that I do always wish the Cubs well. And when they're doing well, totally support them. I feel that, yeah, their family also. But when it's Cubs versus Sox, White Sox all the way. South side.
Mm, if it's Cubs versus Sox, sounds like perception is out of the window.
Mm,
There you go.
Don't
north,
That's
care
the,
about your perspective
the north
today.
side perspective versus the south side perspective is
Not looking
different.
through that lens. Not looking through that lens.
All right, Andre, obviously you've been involved with the field of interpretation for a long time. You've done more than just this work with perspectives. You're a lead trainer with NAI. You conduct our CIG Train the Trainer and CIH Train the Trainer courses on behalf of NAI. So you've been doing a lot of things with NAI. You have a, I'm not going to say a perspective, but you have something that you've talked about in the past that you call the triad of nature. What is the triad of nature?
Well, the triad of nature is something that is, I'm going to have to admit, personal to me, because to me it's something that I can solve all problems of the world with. And a triad of nature are three things: spiders, Sasquatch, and possums. So anytime I am trying to figure out the vast problems of the world, I take a look at how spiders have influenced cultures across the world, no matter what people think of them. I love the fact that we can question the reality of Sasquatch. Does Sasquatch really exist? Well, I think a lot of people making money off of Sasquatch, I think would say Sasquatch is real to some degree. And possums, well, I think possums are just plain cruel because no matter what horrors exist, the possums persist. So that
I,
triad of nature, I think, yes, says it for me.
I'm gonna try to interpret the triad of nature here. So spiders, they people have all sorts of perspectives about spiders. They hate them, they love them, they think they're cool. We were talking before we got on about the fact that Song has tarantulas in Utah. I didn't know that. That was brand new information for me. My daughter Maya loves nature, hates spiders. And so whenever she finds a spider, she has to call someone to come get it, but don't hurt it. You got to just bring it outside, right?
Love it, love it.
That's Maya. All right. Sasquatch, we all have cryptozoology, right? Like we all have our myths. They're part cultural, part natural. You know, for me, it's the Vermont lake monster is my favorite, Champ the lake
Hmm.
monster and Lake Champlain. And then possums, they just get at how cool nature is. Look how cool
That's
a
right.
possum is. That's I think for a lot of people that's going to be the platypus. Just that's just how
Okay.
cool nature is. So
Platypus are
Andrea,
cool. They fluoresce just like possums do under long wave ultraviolet light. So cool glowing and mammals. So there we go. I like the platypus too.
if I were I want to challenge all of our listeners to develop their own triad of nature with things that are representative of all the various cool things about nature. I would have to, in mine, I think my personal triad of nature would have to involve manatees because they're just living the
Ooh,
life I want to live out there, right? They're floating around in salt water and just sort of chomping their way through the day right there, just floating and chomping.
absolutely, absolutely. Love the manatees.
Well, I think one final question then, Andre, since you've worked at two very popular zoos, do you have a favorite animal?
Ooh.
Ooh, yes, I do.
And they're not
Absolutely.
listening. The animals at the zoo are not listening, we
They're not
promise.
listening. I'm going to have to say, I have to give it to spiders. Spiders, my favorite animal. You'll find out one of the reasons why during my keynote. So
Ah,
there's something to look forward to, but I've just always been amazed at how influential spiders have been throughout so many cultures around the world in ways that people don't even realize. So I think that spiders to me are my favorite animal.
Andre, we're going to be in Virginia. I went to school at the University of Richmond in
Hmm.
Virginia. Do you know the mascot for the University of Richmond? It's the only college in the nation with this mascot.
What is it? What
It
is
is
it?
the Richmond Spiders.
Nice, nice. I'm
I
gonna have
I
to
am a
get that
spider.
logo. All right. Love it, Paul.
Well, Andre, thank you so much for being a guest on our podcast. It's always an enjoyable time with you and always very educational. I always learn something when we chat.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Song, and you as well, Paul.
Andre, where can people find the Brookfield Zoo Chicago, and perhaps where can people find the work that you're doing online?
All right. So if you want to find Brookfield Zoo Chicago, you can look us up online at brookfieldzoochicago.org. And take a look through our web pages there, and we do have a section on there that's education and community engagement. That way people can find out about a lot of the things our department is doing here, and they can take a look at the breadth of things that Brookfield Zoo Chicago is doing, and hopefully people will walk away inspired with our motto to connect, care, and conserve.
And interpreters,
That's
that's
What's
what's
up?
up.